So thank you for this brief introduction. So quickly talking about myself, as you said, I have been working with Cinépolis for the last 5 years now and have been associated with this industry. So this industry is very fascinating to me. This is something which helps me learn more about what are the innovations going on, how the overall industry with different players works in, who are the key members for this industry particularly. So what we'll do is in this session, I hope my screen is visible. So what we'll do is that we will go through what are the background of this industry, how this industry has evolved in the last century, what are the key areas which we focus on as per the industry, like as a business manager, as a B school person, what are the KPIs which we can look at, what are the places where we can drive profitability, and eventually we will talk about innovation, what are the innovation which has been going on, and what is the future of this exhibition industry in India. So this is something which we'll talk about in the next few minutes. So I have kept around 40 minutes where I speak, and then the remaining 20 minutes for question answers or comments which any of the participants have. So what we'll do is, like, before we jump into the presentation, we'll quickly establish some rules. Like, I know it's a Sunday. No one wants to probably spend their Sunday learning something. Probably they also want to have something at the Poha Point or have a fancy day for the remaining hours. But what we'll do is we'll quickly establish some rules for this session. So basic rules: there should be no distractions and no phone calls while we are going through this particular session. Avoid multitasking. I know you have assignments to complete, but then I think this is an opportunity where you can probably learn more about this industry. Not more often you get to see these insights. And then try to make relevant notes. I believe this PPT has already been shared with Arnav, so who would be moderating this session. And apart from that, please participate and ask questions. You are free to ask any questions which you want. There is no fundamental question, no stupid question. Anything which you feel you want to ask or have queries about this industry, I'll try to explain as much as possible wherever I can explain. Of course, there are things which are beyond my scope, but then we certainly I have more insights after staying about half a decade in this particular business. So these are some basic rules. And to start with a very power-packed evening, we will start with our presentation. So talking about what we would be covering. So we will quickly have a summary of the historical snapshot about this industry. Then we will talk about the industry basics, like how this industry has performed, what are the basic key elements which drive the profitability of the company. Then what are the key terminologies we use? Because every organization, there are some key terminologies or the KPIs or the KRAs which the business people follow. Then we'll talk about innovation. That's something which the idea is about how innovation is happening in this industry and what is the future of innovation. And then talking about what is the future of cinema exhibition in general in this country. So starting about the history of cinema exhibition. So let's jump a century before, like more than a century before. About 125 years ago, there were two French brothers, the Lumiere brothers, Augustin and Louis Lumiere. So they invented a device called cinematograph. So now cinematograph was basically a projector of that time. So what we see projectors, very fancy projectors today, it was a very basic projector which used to run in an analog format. So basically a reel used to run and then it used to just telecast the image on the screen. So that was a very basic handheld projector which these two brothers invented. Now, this was capable of showing a picture to a large audience because the screen, once projected on the screen, the image was very larger than life. What happened later was, in the upcoming years, there were public screenings about happening in the same city. So since this was based out of Paris, so in Paris, there used to be a public screening of motion pictures. So that is something which started coming into place after these guys invented the cinematograph. What happened next was something which happens every time, like something is developed. US is the first market which starts establishing this particular product. So now in America, there were movie theaters established in New Orleans in 1896. So now in US particularly, this industry started growing rapidly, more faster than in Europe. Now this was followed by addition of more theaters in the prime cities of New York and Washington. So this is something which started happening after the Lumiere brothers had invented the cinematograph, a basic projection device. So now in 1915, another breakthrough happened in this industry is that a 3D film was introduced in New York. Now, what we see in the left, an image of the 3D glasses which were used at that time. So basically, those were the red and green 3D glasses, and it was required to view test reels. So basically, a 3D part could have been seen through these things. So that is something which happened like more than a century ago, not very similar to what we assume that 3D is a very recent concept. 3D glasses were existing for more than 100 years ago. However, proper 3D films and everything started coming in the mid of 20th century. Now in 1924, there was another thing which happened was that the cinema exhibitors, they started playing two films in a day. So earlier there used to be a single content which used to play. Now, because of the consumption of the content, people started liking this thing, and there were two content which were playing simultaneously in a day. So let's say there is a show in the morning, there is a show in the evening, and there are two particular content which are running in a day. So consumers started consuming more content, and by 1927, a path-breaking thing happened in this industry was that a sound was added by Warner Brothers in a movie called The Jazz Singer. Now, this is something which was very much path-breaking because until then, for the last 30 years, what was happening is all the movies which were coming out were like only the animation or the uh, movies without sound. So what we see as the historic Charlie Chaplin kind of movies, those were the things at that time. Now with Jazz Singer, with sound being added, this was another innovation at that time which has happened, and that was a very path-breaking thing. One very interesting thing which happened around this time was that within 4 years in India, there was another movie which was released in sound with the synchronized sound. So in 1931, India released the first movie just 4 years after the sound was added. So just to give an idea, like while the industry was being developed in the West, in parallel, the Indian industry was growing at a very faster pace. Even the technological adaptations were happening at a very faster pace. So this is probably a homework for you. You need to just find which was the first Hindi talkie movie which was released in 1931, but that's something which is for your homework. We'll quickly move to further like what happened in this industry. In 1920s, a very favorite snack was introduced in the movie theaters. That's popcorn. Now, popcorn, which is also a very major product which is produced in the United States, like there is a very big mass production which happens. Popcorn started being a very complementary product to the theaters. And in 1933, the theater started opening a concessionaire. So concessionaire is basically a refreshment stand where they serve popcorn, Coke, Pepsi, etc. So those were the things which started happening in theaters, and cinema exhibition evolved from that time. Now moving further, in 1935, what happened was like a Technicolor movie was released. So basically, the movies which were happening were only in black and white before this time. And with the Becky Sharp coming in, that was a movie which was shown in colors. So by the mid of 1950s, there was a majority of movies which started coming in color. So was the case in India. Now, the problem was that the Technicolor was a very expensive thing, and hence all movies couldn't be adopted to a color movie. Another thing which happened during that time was that the movies started releasing in CinemaScope. Now, what CinemaScope is, I'll quickly brief you. Like a CinemaScope is basically a very wide format which you see in the theaters. I believe all of you have visited theaters, and even if not, you would have probably seen movies in the college if they are screened right now, because at my time there used to be movie screenings in college. So CinemaScope is basically a wide angle movie which gives you a better enhanced version to view because the movie exhibition is all about the experiential event. So once you go in a theater, you would want to see something in a very wide format which gives you a larger than life image. So that is something which started happening in 1950s. As 1960s come, multiplex starts coming into the picture. So there were earlier only standalone screens, and eventually multiplexes started coming in. A single screen is being converted into multiple screens because there is a high demand. There are larger content which were being released, and people wanted to see more of that stuff. So a single screen couldn't suffice for multiple contents being played. Eventually, another technological innovation which happened was in Japan, that the first IMAX concept was shown or premiered in Osaka. in Japan. So that was something, another path-breaking thing, because as you know, IMAX means image maximum. A 70 movie is shown, like instead of a 35 which was a regular thing. And it was something of a very path-breaking thing, because the it is more larger than life versus a regular movie which is shown in theaters. So this is something which started coming as an innovation, that people want even bigger screens, larger than life concept. That started coming in from 1970 onwards. Now, as we speak today, there are around 1,600 IMAX screens worldwide, and in India alone, there are around 30 IMAX screens. So this is something which is happening in India. IMAX is a very go-to word for, or a buzzword. So we'll move further. What happened later was that by 2009, the movie theaters started replacing their traditional projectors to digital projection. So the image which you see on the right is an image of a digital projector. So earlier, if you would have seen in the movies or in probably some old concepts where the movie was played in a reel. So that reel used to play at a very faster rate, and the projection used to happen by throwing light across the reel. So that is how the movies were projected. That was a very traditional analog projection which used to happen. And in this century, in the beginning of this century, what happened is digital projection starts coming in. Now, this projector was a very expensive projector versus the regular traditional analog projector. So what the exhibitors did was that, okay, I will invest in this technology. However, I will be levying a fees called virtual print fee. And since I'm investing in the technology, I would be taking that fee from the distributor. And hence, this was a agreement between the exhibitors and the distributors, that we can probably charge additional fees by only showcasing movies through digital projection. Excuse me. So just quickly understanding, like, do you see that since the beginning of this movie theater era, there has been consistent innovation? Like every then and now, there has been something which came up, and there has been innovation right now. Like what we see movies today are not the same which used to happen like even 10 years ago. So this innovation is a continuous journey which is already happening in this industry. Now talking about what are the basic tenets from this industry. So we need to understand what happens at the time of movie making, and then we'll try to quickly understand who are the main key players in this industry who help us see the final movie. So at the time of movie making, there is basically three parts: a pre-production, a production, and a post-production. So very simple terms, and let's understand who are the key players. So during pre-production, the main key player is the producer, or there could be multiple producers for a movie. So what the producers would do is like they are the people who would be making sure that there is enough money to make the movie. But the first thing is there should be a script for the movies. So they will search for a script writer. They would probably make a like make a script through a book, or maybe they'll steal a script from some another movie, or have their own innovation. Bring the writers in, see the one which can sell best in the market. So then they would be asking for multiple scripts. Then they require money. So a producer may not be self-sufficient to fund a movie. So probably that producer could go to some investors. Now that investor could be a bank, there could be some rich guy, there could be investment coming from Dubai, I don't know. But investor is basically who is investing, sending money or sponsoring the making of the movie. And then there is a production manager. Now the production manager is someone who would be aligning that all people are working in a common goal to make this movie. So basically, the production manager is the person who would be recruiting the actors, directors, cinematographers, etc., etc., etc. So probably a production manager's role is more of an HR. So they would be bringing all people together so that a final product comes out, which is a very good movie for the audience. So during the production, the key players are the director. Now, as we know, it's a very common term. A director is someone who would be directing the movie. And then the actors, like there are multiple actors involved. There will be a star actor, there will be the background actors. So everyone who is involved in making that film or acting in the film are actors. Then there are cinematographers. Without a cinematographer, without knowing where the movie should be shot or something, the movie will not come out good. So there are cinematographers linked to that movie who would be preparing the making of the movie. And then there are technicians, because everywhere you require a technical team. Those are the people who will shape the making of the movie in an actual movie, which comes out as a very visually appealing, larger than life. And then talking about the post production, we will be requiring sound designers. So sound designers are the people who would be adding songs, sounds, background effects, because that's what makes the movie a very appealing movie to the audience. Like without sound designers, probably a horror movie will not sound that great until there are special effects. A movie, or if it's a comedy movie, there has to be someone who has to laugh in behind, or maybe some comical music in behind. So these are people who will add that taste to that movie. And then there are graphic designers, because graphic designers require the movie to look more appealing. And then finally, there are distributors. So once the movie is made by the producer, it's the distributor who would be buying the movie and the rights from the producer. So who are the main key players in this entire industry structure? So they are producers and distributors. So basically, a producer who has made the movie, like collected the money, brought people together, and finally made the movie. Whereas a distributor is someone who would be buying all the movie rights, and then he or she would be distributing to the entire exhibitors. Now, a distributor is a person who will have the highest risk of procuring this movie right, because that person, when the distributor pays to a producer, so it's uh, clear that the producer has made the money, and a distributor would probably also be buying if there's a big star to it. So when let's say a big star is attached to a movie, the price of the movie is sold at a higher price rate, because the big star also charges money. The producer wants to recover the cost, and the distributor would be eventually buying the rights for the movie. So quickly understanding how this happens. So how is the transaction which is placed between the producers and distributors? So a quick summary about how this actually happens is in the below points. Firstly, there's a production cost to it. So we know that all this paying the actors, making the cinematography, special effects, blah, 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 there's a production cost attached to it. That's something which that team is doing. Here, B school people don't enter. B school people will enter at the end. So then there's a distributor's purchase, because the distributor will be purchasing at a higher price from the production cost. It's usually this is the case because the producer wants to make money, and they are safeguarded in case they are able to sell the movie. There would be some cases where the producer makes the money, but then they don't get distributors. And that's place where producers also lose money, because if they don't find distributor, they would also be trading or making sure that, okay, someone buys the movie, some distribution rights, and eventually they can make some money out of it, whatever they invested. So usually to make a movie profitable, they would be selling at a higher price. Now what we see is like a distributor purchase is higher than the production cost. So this part becomes the margin. So this is the producer's margin which comes into place. So this is what the producer has gained. And apart from that, the producer also sells the satellite rights. They would probably be selling on a Netflix or an Amazon Prime or any other OTT, or maybe showing on the television on a Star TV or ZTV, blah, blah, blah. So these are the satellite rights. So they earn extra money on satellite rights. It could be the case that the distributor also procures the satellite rights for that particular movie. And then there are music rights. So we know that a movie with a very good music does wonders. If the music is very good, then the producer will not let go any opportunity which helps them make money by selling music. So they sell music rights to different channels, to different companies. It could be the case that the distributor again purchases the music rights, just like they would have purchased the satellite rights also. Now, what we see is that this is my overall distributor purchase. So let's say a distributor spent this much money in procuring the rights for the movie. Now they have to do multiple things, like getting a movie onboarded, purchasing the movie will not help them sell the movie. They have to do multiple things to make that movie sellable in the market. So apart from the film rights, they need to print the movie. Now printing is a very traditional term, because earlier when the movie was printed on reels, it used to be printed in multiple reels, because if a movie is playing in, let's say, a cinema in Delhi, with that reel, the movie also needs to play in Mumbai. Now in Mumbai, with that reel, it's not possible, because logistically you cannot transfer same reel from Delhi to Mumbai. So they have to print multiple reels for different locations. often in the historical times, it was the same reel which used to go and run for multiple days. There used to be Silver Jubilee days and Silver Jubilee weeks, sorry, where the movie used to run for about 25 weeks. And eventually, if the movie is uh, people have consumed that content, the same reel used to go in the tier 2 or tier 3 cities. So often, let's say a movie which was released in Mumbai or Delhi in the first week of the year, it could be highly likely that by 20th week, that movie is being released in a tier 2 or tier 3 city of Jaipur or or Indore. This is something which can happen, which used to happen in earlier days. Now, printing, as I mentioned, it's a traditional term. Now we all have digital projections. Now, about digital projections, you still need to print. The printing term also means that if there is a movie which is being released, it also needs to release in multiple languages. Now, imagine RRR, which was a very super hit movie in 2022, directed by S.S. Rajamouli. It wouldn't have done that great if it was not released in other languages. Similarly, last year's Pushpa 2, if it was had only been released in Telugu, probably the business wouldn't have been that great because the Hindi belt also contributes. So it's very important for the distributor to make the right bets. So let's say Pushpa 2 which was made in Telugu. They also translate the same movie into Hindi, into multiple languages, because there is an audience in Tamil, Malayalam, Kannada, Gujarati, Marathi, Punjabi. So they make the right bets and make multiple prints to it. So that dubbing has to happen. There are things which would be involved while making of that dubbing or using subtitles. So this is how it happens. There have been cases when the movie ran very well in, let's say, in a particular region, which was the original movie. I'll just give an example. There was a movie called Kantara, which was released in Kannada. Now, Kantara did super well in the Kannada market. Eventually, the distributor, Hombale Films, realized that this is an opportunity where I can release the same movie in Hindi language. So after 2 weeks, this movie was released in Hindi. That's purely based on the upselling that, okay, there is a consumer sitting in the Hindi market who wants to consume this content. And then they started investing more money around it. So once these terms are called printing because you require multiple prints for the movie. And then there's also a shipping thing. Now, again, shipping is a very historical thing because once the reel was made, you require logistical shipping. You need to make sure that it's not shipped through a regular courier, or because there's high chance that it gets stolen or damaged, which were very expensive at that time. Reels were very expensive. Now the shipping happens through satellite, and this is something which is a technological advancement. With digital projection, there is a KDM attached to the projector. What happens is that there is a unique code which is set to run that movie. So unless that unique code is entered at the time of movie running, the movie cannot be played at that cinema. So this only safeguards the interest that this is the number of time the movie is played in the cinema. There is no piracy to it. So these are things which happen in while shipping it. So now the shipping happens primarily through the satellite. There is no traditional concept of shipping the reels, which has now fairly disappeared now. And then the movie will run well if there is publicity. Like you need to bring actors to probably Kapil Sharma ka show or Amitabh Bachchan's KBC to talk about the movie. If there are no stars talking about the movie, it's highly unlikely that people get attention of it. So this is something which is very important. Again, this is a cost of the distributor. So just imagine the cost which the distributor incurred at the time of procuring the film versus doing these additional stuff of printing, shipping, publicity. They add to multiple costs to their product overall purchase. And then now it comes the showdown time where people like you, me, the B school guys enter, and we make sure that how to make this movie profitable. These are the exhibition people. Now in exhibition industry, it's very important that the distributor earns money out of it. So to break even their cost, they would be selling at some certain margin. So let's say when you see a movie, the entire movie doesn't go to the exhibitor. Let's say if you visit some PVR cinema. So in PVR, if you are buying a ticket of 236 rupees, you are not spending 236 rupees entirely to the distributor or the exhibitor, to the PVR. So basically, there are different consumers to that particular amount. And then this is what we will discuss in the next slide. Now talking about when the movie is released. So let's say you take a ticket price. There is, for ease of calculation, the ticket is priced at 236 rupees for simplicity, or let's say 354 rupees because the movie prices are higher now. So let's say you purchase a ticket of 354 rupees, and that within that there is someone who takes some money out of it. So here our finance ministry comes in. They say, I want tax. 18% tax goes directly to the government. So this is something which which is non-negotiable. So this ticket some part of the ticket, let's say 54 rupees, would be going directly to the government. Of the remaining 300 rupees, this is something which goes into the sharing between the distributor and the exhibitor. So the 50% goes to the distributor in most of the cases, 50% will go to the exhibitor. Now this 50% is something, a kind of agreement. This can change basis the movie, basis the demand, basis their internal understanding, basis the number of screens it is released. So primarily this is 50-50%. For regional content, let's say a Telugu or a Tamil content, the distributor share is higher. This has been the case historically. In India, primarily for Bollywood, the distributor share is at 50%. For some movies, the distributor share is also at 47.5%, but that's something, as I mentioned, it varies. Now with this distributor share, they would be earning movie, like they would be asking for number of screens, and eventually by the number of tickets sold, they would be earning that much money. What happens later is, like, week one was a blockbuster. Let's say in week one, both earned a tremendous amount of money, the distributors and the exhibitor. Let's say the movie reached 100 crore plus. It's Pushpa 2 time. So what would the distributor do? So they would say, okay, it was 50% if I agreed to. Since the movie did very well, I can give you a bonus. So by bonus, basically the distributor share for the first week gets reduced and the exhibitor starts earning more. So that's primarily based on the contractual agreement between the two parties. And then this final transaction is settled. Now, let's say we enter the week 2 of the movie. You would have gone to movies in the second or third week. There is a decline in ticket price. Usually it is a decline in ticket price because of two reasons. One is the demand has reduced. The demand in the first week versus second week is very different. That demand gets reduced and hence the ticket price is reduced. And with that, what we see is that we see a lesser distributor share every week. While the tax part remains 18%, the exhibitor share starts increasing. And hence, okay, this is a graph not as per the scale, but this is something which usually happens. So in subsequent weeks, as we can see, the distributor share is reducing. Okay, now what we'll do is we'll move further. So let's understand what are the revenue sources for the exhibitors. Now, let's say if I'm an exhibitor who is showcasing movie to the patrons, to the people, to the audience, where all I can earn money. One source of money where I can earn is primarily the movie tickets. Okay, there is some noise in the background. I hope that's not disturbing that much. We have very good neighbors here. So let me know in case I need to repeat something. Okay. So primary source of revenue for us, for the exhibitors, is the movie ticket. That's something which brings the audience in. So for movie tickets, the exhibitors earn. Eventually, then there is food and beverage. As I mentioned in the earlier slides, popcorn, Coke, Pepsi, nachos, blah, 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 they go very well when movie watching. And then the exhibitors try to leverage on the food and beverage. And hence, they get additional revenues from this particular channel. And the third channel is the ad sales. So once you go into the movie, you would be seeing ads. You would see Vico Vajradanti ad, or you would see Lyra Lyra, or you would see any ad which you see, OnePlus or movies or movie trailers. These all are ad sales. So when these ad sales are played, those people also want to spend money for this captive audience. Now, in movie theaters, we call this audience as the captive audience because while you are watching the movie, you cannot go out. So this is the captive audience that you have to watch it. So you will see examples of captive audience for movie theaters, for the airline industry, and hence the pricing also becomes a little higher than a normal traditional pricing outside. And the purpose behind this is that captive audience, you can leverage more revenues, more profitability. Now, just to explain how our standard P&L would look like for a movie exhibitor. So as we see, there are net revenues. So what are the net revenues where I earn money? I earn money from box office, from F&B, and from advertisements. And then what are my costs to it? So basically, the cost which I am bearing is the distributor cost, which I have to pay, let's say 50%, which cumulatively goes down. But eventually, I have to pay the cost to the distributor who gave me that movie. Then the cost of the food and beverages. So if I'm selling popcorn, I have procured the kernels or the oil or the seasoning to prepare that particular product. There is a cost attached to it. I need to remove that cost. So once I remove the cost of sales, then I get the gross profit. So gross profit is basically my net revenues minus my cost of sales. Now, cinema theaters don't only work on this. There are other expenses attached to it, and there are multiple expenses. So what we have tried to do is like try to summarize what are the expenses so that it's easier for all of you to understand in what categories it comes out. So when you go to enter the cinema, there is a person who would be scanning your ticket, telling you where to go, helping you serve the popcorn, and checking at the counter, like about who are the ushers, that what you require, what you don't require. So those comes into the theater payroll because there is a team which would be supporting the cinema's operations. Then a bigger operating expense is the lease rentals. This is one of the highest operating expenses because, as we know, in India, the lease rentals are very high. And if it's an upkeep mall, like let's say a very premium mall, so the lease rentals grow exponentially high. Apart from that, there are expenses like electricity, water. Then there are maintenance expenses. Those chairs which you see, the sliding chairs, the rocker chairs, all these chairs require maintenance. They break over a period of time. So this comes as a regular expense for the cinema, and these are all part of operating expenses. So once you reduce the operating expenses from the gross profit, you reach the operating income of the cinema or of the company. Now with the operating income, if that operating income is coming out, there are other expenses also. So then there are people sitting at the headquarters who would be managing different teams, who would be planning the promotion, negotiating with the distributors, who would be eventually taking a payroll. So that payroll comes into corporate expenses. There are travels attached to it. You have to meet important stakeholders. So then those travel expenses are also reduced from the operating income to reach the EBITDA level. Now, everyone knows what EBITDA is. Like, it's earning before interest, tax, depreciation, and amortization. So basically, after EBITDA, there is EBIT level, then there is after PBT, then there is PAT. So these are things which are very basics, but we primarily wanted to highlight on what are the categorizations of each net revenue, cost of sales, and operating expenses. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll move further. We'll talk about the key terms which are used in this industry. So the key term which is used is admissions or the admits or the number of patrons who came to the cinema. So basically how many people are coming in the cinema, how many tickets we are selling is basically admissions. The number of people who come, they buy tickets at a ticket price. And when we multiply it, we get the box office revenues. So if we include the tax part, it's gross box office. If we don't include the tax part, it's the net box office revenue. Then there is a very common term called occupancy. So let's say there is a blockbuster movie which releases. The movie's first show would be probably running at 100% occupancy. Let's imagine like Rajnikant's Jailer is released and there is 100% tickets sold. It's a houseful show. So it's 100% occupancy. Whereas, let's say there is another movie which is released and it's selling only 20% of the show seats. So it's 20% occupancy. It's very simple. Then there is a market share. Now, within multiple players involved in this industry, let's say the larger players in India, PVR Inox, Cinépolis, Mirage, MovieMax, Wave, these are the larger players in India. So they also compete against the same audience visiting one theater or the another. So this tells them internally what is the market share which they are commanding. Just like in the airline industry, if you prefer to choose an Indigo over Air India, so the Indigo market shares increase. So that's something in very simple terms, how many people are visiting which particular theater. And then there are the food and beverage revenues. So food and beverage revenues are also very important because this only adds to the P&L. Then there are ad sales revenue. So as we see, as I mentioned, you see the Vico Vajadanti ad or any ad which you see on the screen during intermission before the movie starts. These all contribute to the ad sales revenue. And then there is the average ticket price. This is a very important parameter which we see basically, that how much box office revenue came divided by total number of admissions. So this tells us what was the average ticket price for any particular movie or on a particular day. Similarly, there is another KPI for F&B which is called spend per head. So basically how much F&B revenue came divided by my total number of admissions. This term is called spend per head. In some formats, they also, or in some countries, they use this term as RPP, revenue per patron, but primarily it's called spend per head. Then there is a strike rate. So strike rate is basically how many transactions have happened over my counter divided by my total number of admissions. So this gives me what is my strike rate. So let's say if I was having 1,000 people in a day in a cinema and only 200 people came to the counter to procure, to buy anything. So that was my 20% strike rate. Then there is an average value of transaction. So basically my total F&B revenues divided by my total transactions. This gives me my AVT. So this PPT would be shared with the team. So please feel free to do as per your understanding later. Another KPI which we use internally is called PSPM. That means per screen per month. So basically, whatever the ads which are playing in a theater, which increases at the time of a blockbuster movie, so those all contribute to the ad sales, and divided by the total number of screens, it gives me my ad screens revenue at a monthly level, PSPN. And hence we see that is there an opportunity to innovate something across all these focus areas? The answer is yes. And then this is where the team comes in, the HO team or multiple teams linked to it. They would be doing multiple activations in the cinema, which helps you increase your the respective KPI. So let's say if I have to increase my market share, what I can do is I can, let's say, reduce a ticket price, but also I can leverage that economies of scale. So if I reduce my ticket price and more number of people start coming in, eventually I'm earning more. So that's something which exhibitors do, like they try to innovate this kind of concept. Then in F&B revenue, if I do a special pricing in the term specific days, this helps increase my overall F&B revenues. I launch a product, a new product, then I make a very lucrative offer of add something to it at only 20 rupees, 30 rupees. This is something, an additional revenue which is for me. So these kind of activations are all done by the cinema exhibition team. Now, talking about the innovation in exhibition industry, what we'll talk about is what has happened and where do we see this innovation going further. What you see on the screen in a very dull image right now is a ScreenX theater. So I'm not sure if you ever had a chance to visit a ScreenX theater. There is one in Mumbai. I don't know about Delhi, but there is one in Mumbai. So this kind of theater is where you see the screen not only in the front but also on the side. So this gives more of an immersive experience. So these are the innovations which are already going in this industry. So this is something which is bound to happen. This will only increase. And this is something which we would be talking about. Talking about what the innovation is, as per the Oxford definition, it's the introduction of new things, ideas, or ways of doing something. Now, for exhibition industry, we cannot do innovation in making of film. But then while showcasing or the experiential part is something what we do as the industry. So what are the opportunity areas? We can innovate in the projection and sound, making a Dolby sound or an Atmos sound. Then talking about the projection, we can have a better projection. We can have alternate content selection. So not in India, outside, there is a very good salience whenever there is a FIFA World Cup match or any match which has a very high consumption of the audience. So those football matches, those 2 hours are basically screened on the movie, and then the churn rate is even better than a regular movie at times. So this is an alternate content basically which is shown in the movie theaters. So basically movie theaters are not only relying on the movies, but then also on the alternate content. In India, whenever there's an IPL, there are some screens which are showcasing IPL. If there's an India-Pakistan match, a T20 match particularly, so those 3.5 hours is something which is dedicated for those match because there is an audience which wants to see that content. Then there are food options where the innovation keeps on happening. So in food options, there is a more gourmet range of products which are launched. cinema is not only now about popcorn and Coke or Pepsi. Now cinema is also about pizzas, burgers, sandwiches, your gourmet desserts, your very fancy rolls, a very curated product, or even sushis in some cases in very luxury cinemas. So these are the food options where innovation is already being happened. And then there is a luxury experience because consumers have the willingness to pay. We would be talking about the luxury experience in some brief. And then the ease of consumer journey, whether it's booking the ticket, going to the cinema, all those things, along with technology, sustainability, and partnerships. These are things which we are already in terms of doing, in terms of innovation, which is being done in this industry. So we'll quickly capture some part of it. Firstly, talking about the VR and AR part. Now, this is a very buzzword. Everyone talks about VR, AR, blockchain, etc., etc. So we know that the virtual reality is something which is the new trend. People want to have an immersive experience while watching a movie. Along with the screens, they also want to see something which is happening beyond them. They want to feel that they are within the movie, inside the movie, and not watching away from it. So these are the things which are already happening. This is yet to scale. There is a lot of research which is going on in the uh, US market, and eventually, if this becomes successful, this will also be a regular affair. So this is something, a very important innovation which is happening in terms of artificial intelligence. There's predictive analysis. We know that what would work, what would not work, basis the past data, basis the actor profile, basis the historical uh, term which we call it admits per show. What was the occupancy basically? So those are things which we try to use to understand how the movie would be doing, how many shows should be allocated, what is the preferred time of the audience. So these are all things which are part of the innovation happening in this industry. Then about the immersive experience for the viewers, we get a 3D holographic cinema. There's advanced CGI, which is now being used in the movies. And then there is a very high quality sound production, interactive storytelling, which is again part of this showcasing movies. Now, moving further, talking about the dynamic pricing model. This is something which is a very basic economic concept. We all have read about supply and demand, right? If I am having a high demand and very less supply, what I can do is I can increase the pricing. This is the trimester one economics. So there is no brainer thing that if the consumer is willing to spend, okay, leverage that additional premium. So if there is, let's say, an occupancy which reaches 70%, 80%, and consumers are willing to pay a 400 rupee for a ticket versus a 300 rupee, you increase the prices. This is just like an airline ticket. So at the last moment, if you want to enter into a buy a ticket, the ticket prices go up. So that's a very similar model the cinema exhibition industry is now implementing. This is something which is already in India now. So this is based purely on demand. There is higher demand on weekend, you increase the prices. There is lower demand on weekday, you reduce the prices. If people are not coming at the counter to purchase F&B, you reduce the prices. If they are already coming, you increase the prices. This is something which is part and parcel of our regular business. Talking about the luxury. So this is another set of audience which wants a very good curated experience. Now, this is a price discrimination graph which we all have read again in economics. So in this price discrimination is basically it talks about a consumer who is willing to spend an extra dime for a better service. So these luxury experience comes with a valet parking. So a consumer who walks into a theater, they show their movie ticket. There's a valet person who would be taking your car, parking it, keeping the keys, so that you only get a luxury experience. You get a reclining seat, you get a gourmet food, you get a sushi, probably if you want, you'll also get a Thai food. So those are things which are already part of this industry. And then a personalized service with a butler on call. So any curation in your food menu or anything which you want in this while watching a movie is something which you can leverage now. These all are part of luxury experiences. All this is an innovation which has happened in the recent years. Talking about the sustainability and partnerships. So this is something which comes as a very important part, that how do we make use innovation for making sustainable businesses. So firstly, we want to reduce cost. We use, while entering lobby area, the consumer sees a very fancy chandelier, but it comes at a very high cost of operation because it consumes electricity, it consumes a lot of power, and hence to make it more efficient, you need to reduce cost. Then you require sponsors because alone you cannot do much activations. Hence, you do movie associations. So let's say if a movie is being released in IMAX, 4DX, PXL, there are multiple formats, Macro X, CX, ScreenX. You try to tag it with a movie association. So if you see Pushpa 2 being released in IMAX or Interstellar being re-released in IMAX, this is something is they want IMAX to be part of it, where they would also be giving a discount to the exhibitors. And then you also require them for crew incentives. So to make sure that the cinema team is doing good, so you sponsor some of the lucrative pricing for the crew. Then there are special product and merchandise launches with the movie. So this is something which happens at the time of movie release. So then there is a revenue sharing model with the lessors. So let's say a rental model where the basically a mall owner or the developer is not taking a fixed rent, but based on the movie's performance. This is something which has drastically changed after COVID. And now the cinema exhibitors are very particularly looking for the lessors who basically have a revenue sharing model. So this only safeguards both their interest. Like if the movie does very well, of course, both earn money. If the movie doesn't do well, so both are not earning money. So it mitigates the risk for both the players. And then there is a 360-degree campaign for movie release. So you will see images of the stars on popcorn tubs everywhere, big standees, people taking photos in front of them. This only helps add to the glamour of watching movies. And then the multi-language release is something which is part of it, because if you see in recent years, the regional movie content has increased. So what used to be only 45% pre-COVID, 40 to 45%, now it's almost 60%. So regional content has made a huge inroads in this industry. So by regional content, Telugu cinema, Tamil cinema, they have done wonders for this industry. So this is something which is now part and parcel of this business. In terms of future of cinema exhibition, cinema have faced continuous challenges from alternate movie viewing options. So cinemas were considered dead. The epitaph was written, oh, cinemas will not survive. Now we'll watch televisions, movies on televisions. This came in 1960s, in India, 1980s. So people started watching movies on television. But did the cinema die? No. Then they came VCRs. People were like, okay, now we'll buy a cassette, rent a cassette, watch the movie in a VCR. But did the cinemas die? No. But again, epitaphs were written again that the cinema industry will not survive. Then there were CD players. Everyone started rotating CDs in their fingers, talking about, oh, there's a movie in my hand. I can watch a movie anytime. But did the cinema industry die? No, it didn't. Because there is an experiential thing which happens only in the cinemas. And now there's a much talk about alternate viewing content like OTTs, over the top platforms, which includes Netflix, Amazon Prime, Z, Sony. There are multiple OTTs which are existing, Hotstar, blah, blah, blah. Now, these OTTs are definitely right now, yes, they are denting to some extent. They are probably now emerging as an alternate source of movie watching. But then for how long? That's the question. And hence, cinema industry, cinema exhibition industry continues to evolve with a larger experiential format which OTTs cannot give. So over the last 2 years, you would have observed the movies which were released on OTT during COVID. Now there are very less movies which are released in OTTs. So they come to a movie theater. Then after the gestation period of 4 to 8 weeks are then released to the OTTs. And then cinemas have stood through these challenges, and with experiential technology, something which they always leverage. So one additional thing which is very interesting is that OTT has added a larger content for the consumer. So now there is a dedicated content which is for OTT, which was probably never for a movie theater. So let's say there were earlier also movies which were released in movie theaters, but they never did well. Now they know that it's a separate content. It's the kind of content which will directly go to OTT. So OTT is emerging as a different channel, but not a direct competition of cinemas as we see in the recent 2 years. Talking about the future exhibition, just broadly talking about numbers. So cinema market globally is projected to be 86 billion in 2025. It has a CAGR of 5%. And in the next 5 years, it will be 104 billion USD. So this is something in India, we will surpass 5 billion USD in 2025. India has a moviegoer population of 160 million, and on an average, a person watches the movie 6 times. This is an average. Of course, someone would be watching more times, less times. There are people who watch a movie, as per our data, even 40 times in a year. Yeah, that's outrageous. But then there are people like this. Then the regional market has sized up with more audience from the regional belts. This is something which we discussed. And India is by far the most under-screened market. So, excuse me. So in India, the movie is what do we say? The movie theaters are very less versus per million population. So as you can see in US, against a population of 125 million, there are 126 screens. Whereas in India, against a population of uh, so there are only 12 screens against a million population. My bad. So there are 126 screens per million population, and for India, it's only 12 screens per million population. So out of these even 12 screens, let's say it amounts to around 15,000 screens. There are dormant screens about 5,000 which doesn't operate anymore. So this is something in India that the single screens are dying and the multiplex is evolving. So this is how the multiplex structure is there in India. So the screen density, as we see, is higher in South. Of course, this is also primarily by single screen, but those are being converted into multi-screen. So about 10,000 are the serviceable screens. 6,000 are single screens, which was like earlier it was 70%, now it's only 60%. So single screens are dying. Multiplexes are coming up. India releases maximum number of titles globally, like around 1,200 is an average to 1,800 plus titles. With titles, it means the movie being released in multiple languages, multiple formats. India is the highest content consumer in the world. Apart from that, then there are opportunity for India is to expand another 8,000 to 10,000 screens in the next few years. And tier 2, tier 3 cities will be the prime focus for the exhibitors. That's because there is the single screen concept where it is dying and people want to consume content. Then there are more formats which are being released. This only brings in additional revenues. And lastly, the last slide is that there is an AMC. So AMC theaters are the largest theater chain in the world. Every 3 months, there is a better and reimagined cinematic experience in a new form. So every movie released after 3 months brings in a newer content. So, or a newer, better experience than before. This is something which their internal research says. So it's very important that we continue to innovate, continue to give the best experience to the audience. And this is the future of the cinematic experience across the world. So that was the last slide. Thank you for being a wonderful and patient audience. And over to you, Arnav.
We can open the floor for questions now. So if anyone has a question, they can go ahead.
Yes, Tanesh, please go ahead.
I wanted to know about the industry's narrative with the recent release of older films like Kabhi Khushi Kabhi Gum, Jab We Met, and all of these films that were blockbusters in theaters. Is it because of the lesser footfall that the cinema was experiencing post COVID, or the threat from the OTT? What is the industry's narrative or a strategy or the idea behind re-release of all these films?
Okay. So let's go to the pre-COVID era. So pre-COVID, there used to be every once in 2 months a blockbuster movie which used to run for 2 to 3 weeks. Now, this is something which was historical trend. But what we have observed after COVID is that the big budget, big bet movies have been reduced. And hence, there would be a very good movie which will come in. And after certain time, there would be no content which is released. So in that lean period is something which we need to run content. And it's not that we run only one content which is an early release. There are multiple re-releases which are done, but 1 out of 5 re-releases does very well. Like last year, Rockstar, which became a cult movie of its time, was re-released and it did very well. Tumbad, which was a movie which did better in re-release versus when it was originally released in 2018. So this is primarily driven by absence of content, as you mentioned. It's not driven by any pressure from OTT. Like there is something which was bound to happen that during the lean period, alternate content is done. Right now, also as we see, there is a re-release which has happened for Ye Jawani Hai Diwani, Kaho Na Pyare. There were multiple re-releases which happened. One of them will do very good, others will probably do okay, and then this becomes a talking point on social media. So that's the only thing. It's the absence of big content. If there's a big content running in, like when Pushpa was doing very well, there was no release of old content. So that's something which is happening right now. I hope I answered your question.
Yes, sir. Sir, I have a follow-up question if I can. Sir, previously I worked with NFDC and I was working with Inox as well, and I was the festival scheduler for International Film Festival of India that is held in Goa. So I had a comparative experience working with the Film Bazaar and how the distribution network works. And there was one thing, because in NFDC our primary goal was to promote the independent cinema, the independent filmmakers, and giving them platform. And as you mentioned, there are 5,000 screens, single screens that are being dormant. And we were constantly, because NFDC believed that they were the only agency that were there to promote independent cinema, and there were constant talks that the mainstream distribution networks have a monopoly over something, and if they actually allow screen to showcase the independent films that the NFDC selects and promotes, then both industry as well as independent filmmakers can get a share. And we can actually promote in various, from Hindi belt to regional and vernacular belt, because there are in South Indian industry, I believe the independent cinema is uh, uh, actually promoted, and eventually they find their way to OTT networks as well as mainstream screens. Will there will be a possibility in future where these dormant screen can be used to promote independent cinema and both parties can benefit from it?
So it's a very good question, Tanish. Thank you for bringing this in. So
Yeah.
let's understand the first point, that why these screens eventually became dormant in the first place. See, there is a very famous quotation in the book Goal by Eliyahu Goldratt. The organization's goal is to make money. Now, those screens went dead only because they were not making money. So those screens, of course, they have those assets, but then to run a cinema, to run a movie theater, you require money, you require funds. And only if you require funds, if you are able to break even, then you sustain in the long run. Those movie theaters are again remushrooming. That's something which is happening through a franchisee model. So let's say there was a cinema in a very old town called, just to give you an example, let's say there's a cinema in Gorakhpur, which was probably rundown cinema. It closed because of non-profitability. Now that person's, the owner of that place, would probably lease that thing to a PVR or Inox, or not PVR, Inox or Cinépolis. That okay, you run the cinema for me because I cannot afford the distribution costs, I cannot afford the P&A, programming and advertisement. So let's say you run the cinema for me, you take a share of profit, and then also help me make share of profits. So as you mentioned, this thing which is already happening. So with different partners, but not alone through a single kind of independent movies. They have to bring in multiple movies. That is something which will only help them churn revenues. Because if they bring in independent movie makers, only showcase that content, they would again be bound to be losing money. So that is something which the movie theaters are very conscious about, bringing all kind of contents. A single content will not make the movie business profitable. So like for us also, the cinemas which are very less screened, because there is only limited content played, those are not very profitable cinemas versus a multiplex. So a single content, no. For multiple content, yes.
All right, thank you, sir. I believe the like future projection and the dialogue that we need to have in the central agencies of government regarding Ministry of Information like NFDC would be the government should be very proactive into sharing the cost of production as well as distribution. Then only we can make a difference in independent cinema with those screens. So thank you very much, and sir, I would like to connect with you for any professional opportunity. Thank you very much for your
Sure,
time.
Tanesh.
So thank you. On the behalf of the Alumni Committee, I'd like to extend our heartfelt gratitude to Mr. Lakshay Nanda for such an inspiring and insightful session. Your deep dive into cinema exhibition has truly broadened our understanding for this dynamic sector. Once again, thank you, and thank you to all the attendees for making this session a grand success.
Thank you, Arnav. Bye bye, everyone. Have a good day.